So I'd just like to share some of this tradition that could help us, I think. And I'd like to divide it up into 4 characteristics: a visionary spirituality of nature, a sacramental spirituality, a relational spirituality, and a transformational spirituality. That any authentic spirituality of nature has to be visionary, sacramental, relational, and transformational. And I'd just like to explain in a few words on each one of those. The first one, a visionary notion of nature. This is fundamental from, I think, from my own perspective, because it's interesting we use the word nature, whereas in a Christian context, people will use the word creation. And they're 2 different words, maybe for the same thing and maybe not. Because Christianity has always seen the world as created. You know, you're all familiar with the Genesis account, in the beginning. Now, how the world was created, that is another question, and that is up to our intelligence to determine, using the latest advances in evolutionary biology, astrophysics, and cosmology. That's not what I want to address here. But the fact that it has been created, and creation by that very nature then means that this is in relation, that we are in relation to the rest of creation of nature, because we too, in terms of Christian doctrine, are created as well. So there's an immediate solidarity among all creation. Because if I use the word nature, that we've come to use since the Enlightenment in Europe, which in a sense rejected the Christian language and used a more neutral language, nature. Nature is in a sense quite a neutral term. But what can happen is that nature then becomes something that's open for use and exploitation, because it has no relation to me. It's malleable, it's inert, it has no life or autonomy or intrinsic value of its own, because it's nature, it's out there. Whereas the Christian notion always looks at nature as created. So it's created, and therefore it has relationship with me because I too am created. I did not determine my own life. I did not produce my own life. I did not produce the ecosystems in this planet. So it immediately puts it in other words, it puts it in a context with the divine, if you will, with the transcendent. And so this has very important implications then for spirituality. Because if all of creation, all of nature is created by God, I hope that's not a 4-letter word for some people, but that's the word I'll use. It's very simple, 1 syllable. If nature is created by God, sustained by God, and called to glory by God, then nature has its own intrinsic worth. And its worth does not depend on human instrumentality or human utility or necessarily human use. It has an intrinsic worth independent of the needs and the wants and desires of humans. This is not so, or certainly not the dominant paradigm in today's world. Because often today, nature, as you can speak more clearly to this than I can, nature is often seen as a storehouse of resources. Basically a storehouse of resources waiting to be transformed, and the level of transformation dependent solely on our technological sophistication and our financial mobility or financial flexibility. That's what determines the worth of nature in the present economic paradigm of today's world. And this is generally expressed in the Western corporate model that we're so well aware of. So this now becomes the new ideology, the new source of meaning in the Western world. John Paul II, Pope John Paul II in 1991, when he made the first papal address specifically dealt with ecology in January the 1st, 1991, makes this statement. He said, "At the root of the senseless destruction of the natural environment lies an anthropological error, a human-centered error. People think," he said, "that they can make arbitrary use of the earth, subjecting it without restraint to their wills, as though the earth did not have its own requisites and a prior God-given purpose." As if the earth did not have its own vocation, its own autonomy and sense of value. Even in Newfoundland, people say, the Minister of Forest Resources, Kevin Aylward, said, in reference to the large boreal wilderness in Labrador, these forests are underdeveloped. They need to be developed. And they have no meaning unless they're developed. That's my little sideline. And in the Western Star, one will read that our forest resources are assets. But if you do not harvest them, they are no longer assets. So a very strong, dominant corporate ideology that says nature has value only in terms of what it can provide for the creation of wealth. And not only the creation of wealth for humanity, but often, it's sad to say, the creation of wealth for a select few. There is no doubt today that we have the technological power to dominate the world. And we are doing a good job of it now, to the point where even our climate is changing because of human activity. But the question that religion will pose, should we do that which we can do? Should we necessarily do that which we have the technological and financial power to do? That is not a scientific question. That is not a legal question. That is a fundamental human question. And I would equate these fundamental human questions are really fundamental religious questions. And when I say religious, I don't necessarily mean fundamental Catholic questions, Jewish questions, Muslim questions, the great Eastern faiths. All those different faiths will ask the same question. In different ways, culturally conditioned, but they're fundamental religious questions. And I think that's what we could ask as well. The second notion, so that's the notion of nature as created, nature as in solidarity with the rest of humanity, with all of humanity. A second notion of that you could use for developing the spirituality of nature is nature as sacrament. And this is strong in the Catholic Church. We're big on sacraments. You may have learned about the 7 sacraments, and that everything is sacramental, that everything is somehow revelatory of the divine, that nothing is in a sense profane, that all human activity, all human action that promotes goodness, beauty, and truth somehow reveals God. And I think we could just ask ourselves, if we look at our own experience of nature, even just coming up on the boat yesterday, I know for myself, just the experience of the sky and the ocean and the mountains. And what have our experiences of nature been? Whether it's the great mountains of the Rockies or flowers on your windowsill, whether it's the forest of the main river or the salmon fishing on Harry's River in western Newfoundland. Whatever it has been, I'm sure we can all relate to a sense when there have been periods, often fleeting, often that we're unable to articulate, but have been experiences of contentment, experiences of joy, of oneness, of unity, of rootedness in our experience of nature. And I would submit that these are fundamental religious experiences. Because anything that speaks of truth, of beauty, of justice, of life, is religious, is ultimately human, is wonderfully human. And so what is it about nature, what is it about the beauty, the stillness, and maybe the violence of nature even, the violence of the sea, or what is it that leads us to contemplation? What is it that leads us to stop and to be silent and to listen? And just for a moment to say, it is good to be here. It is good to be where I am. And so we're entering into a very profound mystery in nature. That these fleeting moments are not simply just epiphenomena. They're not just simply secondary phenomena, but that we're entering somehow into the mystery of the created world. In theological terms or religious terms, we would say that nature somehow then reveals the divine, that the divine is speaking through the natural world, that goodness and truth and beauty coming through the physical, natural world. So then the world then becomes a mirror, it becomes a theophany, it becomes an opening into something great and wonderful. So nature then, in a Christian sense, and using Christian language and terminology, is inherently sacramental. It reveals something in and through the beauty and the majesty, the intricacy, and the passion of nature. Back in the medieval period, in the early centuries of Christian thought, they always had a sense of two books of revelation. You're probably familiar with the Scripture as revelation, the Scriptures of most great faiths. But in the early church, they had a wonderful sense of the book of nature as well as the book of Scripture. They had a two books notion of revelation. That not only the written word, but the natural word would also be revelatory. And St. Bonaventure, who founded the Franciscans, second founder of the Franciscans way back when, and I think it was the 12th century, this is one thing he wrote one day. He said, "Who is not enlightened by such great splendor in created things is blind. Whoever remains unheedful of such great outcries is deaf. Whoever does not praise the divine in all nature is dumb. Whoever does not turn to the divine after so many signs and wonders is a fool. Open your eyes, therefore, alert the ears of your spirit, unlock your lips and apply your heart, that you may see, hear, praise, love, adore, magnify, and honor the divine in every creature." And that was written in the 1100s. So there's a sense in which, how can we, from whatever faith tradition, or maybe we think that we come from no faith tradition, how can we decode the mystery of this world and enter into the beauty so that it becomes much more? I remember I was saying to my mom one day, I was explaining to her how a rainbow formed in the sky. The prisms and the refraction of light in the sky. And she said, "Oh, John," she said, "it's all fine and wonderful, but I just love the beauty of the rainbow." And for her, it was the mystery of the rainbow and the great sense of beauty and awe. And so another level, at the religious level. And I, with my training, wanted to explain it on another level. Both are true, both are good. The wisdom is to recognize that they are different and each has their own value. A third notion, getting toward the end, is what I would call nature as redemptive, nature as relational. Often I would read in environmental language or different articles how people will say we're connected to nature. And the Gaia hypothesis being the manifestation of that. We're so connected that we're simply neurons on the kind of global superorganism. But could we not also say, not only are we connected physically, we know that. We know we need the earth to survive. But we're also connected relationally. We are related to the environment. We are related to nature somehow. That all my imagination, all my, whether it's in my genes, in my environment, in my psyche, all of it comes from the physical natural world. Imagine someone said once, growing up on the moon. What would your imagination be like if you grew up on the moon? Compared to growing up in the boreal forests, with our tropical forests, our seas, our barrens, our deserts. How different would our minds be? How would we have evolved differently if we had grown up on the moon? What would our imagination be like? What language would we use? What would our poetry and our music and our song, our literature, how different would that be if we had not grown up on the planet Earth with its beauty and its diversity?